Geek Soup. I'm John Vinalas, and I'm here today with a special guest. It's Scott from Rogue Worship Leader, and I know I've posted your stuff and like retweeted and liked it all over the place because hearing Anakin yell "It's working" over Waymaker is never not funny, and I love it every time.
Nice. Yes, it's one of my favorites too.
Yeah. I mentioned this to you earlier this week, but I'm really working on the Rogue One like main theme to work in as a guitar solo at some point when I'm
Yes.
playing with my worship team.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'll keep you posted on that. They live stream those and we'll see when I get to work that in. I'm really looking forward to it because for
Nice.
anyone who hasn't heard or seen the things that I post from Scott, his Instagram is Rogue Worship Leader, and his whole thing is basically mashing up Star Wars with worship things and other like Christian stuff, and it's endlessly entertaining. And so we're here to talk about Star Wars and I'll maybe about his path as an Instagram influencer and all kinds of stuff. So I don't have a lot of structure for this. I mean, we can talk about the latest Star Wars things that have come out.
Yeah.
We can talk about how we can think about Star Wars as Christians. We can talk about our hopes and anticipations for the Acolyte and other forthcoming things. But I'd love to hear something I like to always do with new guests is ask about your path as a geek and what was sort of your entry point or your gateway drug into this whole multifarious world of stuff that other people think is weird.
Yeah.
Where did you start? What was your entree into geek culture?
Yeah, honestly, it's always been Star Wars for sure. Funny enough, my dad, he was a Trekkie,
Okay.
so I never really connected with him on Star Trek stuff. We
Uh-huh.
watched The Next Generation, and I
Yeah.
liked it good enough, but it wasn't something we like super connected on. So,
Okay.
but he try as he may, to try to get something to connect with his son on. It was probably, I think 96 or 97, they started releasing the special edition, the Star
Right.
Wars special
Yeah.
editions in theaters. And my dad, he's, God love him, he forgets this, but we did actually go each and every opening night, quote unquote,
Yeah.
that they had, because they released them in order: A New Hope,
Right.
Empire, Return.
Yep.
And so
Yeah.
each
I remember
opening
watching
night,
them in theaters too. Yep.
yes, absolutely. It was fantastic. So yeah, they were the specialized for the special editions, but that's what I grew up with. So I was about, I think, 14 or 15 when those came out,
Hmm. Yep.
and my dad took me to those every opening night. We got really good seats. That was back before you could save your seats online. You had to get there early. We'd get our popcorn. We had just to get good seats. So there was a fire. I've always been jealous of people who lived through the actual opening nights of the original trilogy,
Yeah.
1977, 80, and 83. That was a little bit before my time, but I got to live vicariously through doing that with the special editions, right? So
Yeah.
that was my entryway. Unfortunately, I knew the story. One of my very first video games growing up was Super Return of the Jedi for Super Nintendo,
Yes.
and so I had already
Great game.
known. It's a fantastic game. I love that game. So for me, Return of the Jedi is very, very nostalgic because of that game.
Yeah.
So for me, that was my entry point. Like, I'd already known the entire story. So unfortunately, I couldn't experience the father reveal in Empire.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
wish I could have, but I knew that, and that was fine. At that point, it was already very, very deeply entrenched in pop culture, that
Right.
the whole "I am your father" thing.
One
So
of
yeah.
my proudest parenting achievements
Hmm.
is that I was able to shelter my firstborn
Oh
from
yes.
that reveal until he saw it for the first time
Yes.
watching Empire Strikes Back.
Thank you. So you also, I'm a father as well. So you also introduced your kids to Star Wars the theatrical release way, correct?
Yes, yeah, in order of
Awesome.
theatrical release.
Yep,
Like
that's
that's
that's the way.
this is the way.
This is the way. Yes, absolutely. I did the same thing with my kids, absolutely. But yeah, just to fast forward through that story, that I honestly became a huge Star Wars nerd in the
Yeah,
late '90s, and then and here's just a I do like the prequels. I will preface this by saying I do like the prequels now. 1999. We're talking. They're releasing a new Star Wars, a fourth Star
yes.
Wars. I was so excited to find out what was going to happen to Luke after the whole
Oh
Vader
no.
incident. Yeah, and then I was like, wait a minute, what? They're going back? They're telling the story from before? What? So that was a little disappointing at first, but then I grew to love the prequels. I still like the original trilogy better,
Yeah,
but there's a special place in my heart, especially because of the memes. I mean, the memes from the
sure.
prequels you cannot deny. They're fantastic. Huge
Sure,
part of
sure.
pop culture,
Yeah.
all that stuff. So I will say
Yeah,
that
I have the high ground
oh,
is
absolutely,
superior. Like
it's working. You know,
it's working.
so I do have a special place in my heart for that. But I had tons of toys from both the original trilogy. You know, I had older siblings that I got the Kenner toys from the late '70s, early '80s. Some of those I still have to this day, which is great. They're part of my collection. I love them.
Yeah,
I have a lot of prequel toys from that era as well that are still in my collection. But I honestly, I let it go for a while.
oh wow,
I
okay.
really here's just to show you. As I got into worship leading when I was 19, I was in Christian bands as a teenager. I was
Yeah,
in
same.
worship. Yeah, great. I was in worship teams from a young age through my
Hmm.
my mid to late teens, and I really took seriously the scripture verse that said that when you grow old, you put away childish things, right?
Oh, bless
So
your heart.
so I through dating, through trying to work out what I wanted to do for a living, who I wanted to marry, all that kind of stuff. In my dating life, I hid the fact that I was a nerd. Then when I eventually got married, I didn't bring that stuff with me when I bought my house. And
Wow.
my mom was like, "Here's all your stuff." I was like, "Can you just hold on to it?" I was still kind of maybe slightly embarrassed. I didn't want my wife to know how geekish I was, for real. So I did. I hid that for a very long time and I put it away. And I'll tell you, it wasn't until The Force Awakens came out in 2015. Um, I
Wow.
took I took my now my kids were too young to see it, but I saw it in theaters with a bunch of friends. It really did awaken something in me, and then subsequently for the rest of the sequel trilogy, my kids were old enough then, and I have two boys and a girl, and so the two
Yeah,
boys were old enough to take to the theater with me, just like my dad did for me. So I wanted to give them that
sure.
opening night experience, just like my dad did. And
Right.
so we did that. And so through that whole process, the sequel trilogy really did help reawaken my love for Star Wars. And then I started collecting. You see all this stuff behind me, like
Right, yeah.
especially through the pandemic. And I said to my mom, I was like, all right, I'm coming and I'm raiding the attic and I'm grabbing all the stuff that I had as a kid. I'm putting it out there, and I started collecting the newer stuff, and so that's where we are today. I mean, Star Wars is my biggest fandom that I'm
Yeah,
involved with. I do like some other stuff too, but not nearly as much as Star Wars. So that's the
sure.
main thing, and it's been dormant for a lot of years, but it came out in full force and to the point where I made the meme page and all that stuff. So here we are.
That's awesome. Were you into the novels?
Oh yeah, the expanded universe for sure. Like
Yeah.
I was actually deeply, deeply wounded by Disney when they decanonized those for
Yes.
sure.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
I
It's
know
such
some of them
a
are
lost opportunity.
oh yeah. It would have been great source material for some of this new stuff, but
Absolutely. Like I had a conversation with on another podcast called Tales of the Force,
oh yeah.
which is a girl who is talking to people about just their personal, experience of Star Wars and what it's meant to them and what
Hmm.
they've learned from it and that was a super great conversation. I think I maybe posted the link to that already on my various things, but I'll post it
Yeah.
again. But yeah, like definitely the Legends canon was my Star Wars for the longest time.
Yeah.
And Man, I love the new Jedi Order series.
Oh yeah, yes.
Like, and I firmly believe that that would have been a vastly superior well
Hmm.
of material to bring in for episodes 7 through 9.
Oh yeah. Get the proper children of all the original characters, Jason and Jaina
Yeah.
Solo and Anakin Skywalker. Yeah, I mean, or Anakin
Well,
Solo. Like, yeah.
and the Yuuzhan Vong like are such a
Oh,
game changer in
they
the
really are.
whole like universe of Star Wars because
Hmm.
like here's something that like you can't use the Force on them like
Yeah.
and what does that mean for you like on a practical level but also like philosophically as a Jedi, when you believe that the Force is what binds all life together, and
Yep.
now this stuff that looks like life is absent from the Force, like what does that mean?
Yeah.
And like the whole the mystery, the way that mystery unfolds is so cool. And yeah, yeah, that's a bummer that
Hmm.
they haven't used that for
They've
sure.
even missed some Legends opportunities with like Thrawn's what was that? The Salamari Salamiri.
Islamiri, the
Islamiri.
Islamiri.
That's what it was.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So like there, because that was another thing that kind of protected him from the Force that
Right.
they could have had in the Ahsoka series,
Sure,
and
easily.
yeah, easily that would have been a they would have crushed it. That would have been great source material to have that element in there. But then because Thrawn in and of himself is such a great tactician. He's such a great
Hmm.
character, but there's
Yeah,
so much more to like his his kind of like thinking two steps ahead, especially
yeah,
with the Jedi. And it's like, come on,
right.
they could have added that into there, and they
The
didn't. Missed opportunity.
Nogri, Talon
Yeah.
Card,
Mm-hmm.
like so many great elements from the Legends canon.
Yeah. I mean,
Ah,
I don't
alas.
despise. I don't despise the direction they took with like bringing in a Night Sister, that the connection with
Yeah,
Morgan
sure.
Elsbeth, like that can be a new direction they kind of take that, and
Hmm.
I'm interested to see how they put that together. But Thrawn will use whatever he needs to use to accomplish his
Right.
goals. So I just wish they would be a little bit more forthcoming with that instead of just kind of leaving it up to, oh well, this just serves because we wanted to include this character. This serves the story in this way, and it's like, no, let's deepen the lore. I think the world building and the character lore is a little bit missing from Disney's new canon.
Yeah, well, and we'll see how and one of the cool things that Ahsoka sets up is if they continue with her stories, we
Hmm.
have an opportunity in this like entirely new galaxy to
Yeah.
bring in whatever they want.
Oh yeah.
And so maybe they get to mine some of that content
Oh yeah.
for future Ahsoka stories.
Yeah, because there's
Um
a season 2 coming out, I believe. So
yeah.
I don't know if it's confirmed yet, but it'll be interesting to see how they go about that.
Well, I'm super glad that the canceling of Rosario Dawson didn't stick. Um
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that would have been
but tell
devastating.
me, yeah, tell me a little bit about how you got your Instagram account started up and what the evolution of that has been. You can talk a little bit about the whole like worship leader kerfuffle,
Yeah,
and just go for a little while on that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Honestly, like we talked about, it had only been a few years since my reawakening of the Star Wars fandom, and as I got reawakened into that with the sequel trilogy, and it's not my favorite. We talked about the Disney canon and things like that. I still like it though because it was something accessible for my kids. And so with that, getting into buying my kids the toys and buying myself the collectibles, I started to notice something online. Like I'm a big gearhead when it comes to my music stuff, and camera equipment and all just the different things that I deal with as a worship and production director at my church. So one of the things that I love is actually my primary instrument when I lead worship is electric guitar. So I do lead from acoustic at times, but I love guitars, and I have a collection of them, a small modest collection of them, And so I'll be on gear forums, and I won't say any of them by name, but there might be some on Facebook or on traditional forums online. And there's this thing that I started to notice, especially with worship musicians, but just musicians in general, is that someone would post like a picture of their rig or, just a guitar or maybe a drum set. And then in the background of that picture would be Star Wars paraphernalia.
Hmm.
And I started to notice that it was a recurring theme. And I'm like, and maybe just because of my bent being a worship musician, I really thought, I'm like, there's something about worship musicians and Star Wars. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of where the inspiration came from. So I would kept that in the back of my mind as I became a Star Wars collector, and I also had those things in the background of my gear shots. And I'm just thinking, assuming to myself, I bet this is like almost like a stereotype, right? And so I leaned into it, and in probably January of 2020, I'll spare these details, but I was going through an issue at the church I was at. The church ended up closing because of COVID, but there was a lot of drama
Oh,
going on and things like that.
yeah.
And I needed just a way to blow off some steam. And my defense mechanism is humor. So, and I saw people memeing online, a big inspiration for me. Shout out to Worship Leader Probs, or it's called Worship Probs
Yeah,
now.
worship probs. Yeah. Hmm.
But Brian, he's become a good friend and fellow memer in the space, especially through the whole Worship Leader trademark incident. But and we'll get to that in a bit.
Yeah.
But I was inspired by his page, and I wanted to make worship memes, but I didn't want to step on his toes. I didn't want to just do another, because I think there was one other one. There was worship fails, and there might have been, and that wasn't so much memes as it was fail videos, right?
Yeah.
So that one I didn't. I saw everybody had their own lane, right? You had a fail army kind of version of
Right.
worship memes. You had Brian doing just like any pop culture worship memes, and there was maybe one or two others that were kind of in that space. But I didn't want to step on anybody's toes. I wanted to do something a little bit different. So the
Yeah.
fact that I am such a Star Wars nerd and that I noticed that worship musicians had these trinkets in the background, um, you know, I've had a boss before, a creative director before, say to me that creativity is just taking two things that don't belong together and smashing them together in a unique way. So I was like, well, I could do that with worship in Star Wars, but I don't want to be cringy about it. I don't want to. I want to be able to merge it into a way where worship musicians, worship leaders who also like Star Wars could enjoy it without feeling cringy about it. Because I'm very
Yeah.
much against Christian cringe and trying to like make sure that in Christian media we're doing the best we can. The Lord deserves our
Right.
best. And
Yes. Oh,
with that, yeah, and with
it's
that,
such a struggle
it
sometimes.
is. It is. It's a struggle. And with that, I was like, well, I don't want to be cringy, but I think what I'll do is I will take the jokes will be worship related, but I will for the theme or for the templates that I use will be Star Wars related. So then that way
Okay.
I can do similar things to what I'm seeing already in the space, like worship leader probs, but I'm not doing the same thing. I could be doing something a little bit different, and that could differentiate me. Never knew, like, and really all I was trying to do is blow off some steam, but I
Yeah.
never really fathomed that I would find my tribe and my people in that. I should have known, I made a correct assumption, I think, in that
Yeah.
worship leaders, worship guys and girls who, are in this space that I am, they would also like Star Wars.
That's
So
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's how
Well,
it
and
started.
so the last episode that I did was with an author of science fiction, a Christian author of science fiction
Oh,
and
awesome.
fantasy, and we actually had an extended conversation
Yeah.
about like what is it that makes Christians like suspicious
Yeah.
of science fiction and fantasy.
Mm.
And kind of the conclusion that I've come to is that it's a discomfort with that which is not like definable and systematized
Yeah.
and like tidy and neat and in little manageable boxes.
Mm.
And so it makes sense to me that those of us who are a little bit more artistic in different ways
Yeah.
would feel ourselves more comfortable in those realms. Like that that tracks.
Yeah.
That
Oh,
definitely tracks.
absolutely. I totally agree
Yeah.
with that. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Interesting.
And
Yeah,
that must be
man.
what it is for sure. Like that creative mind and that openness to creativity and just being able to dream. And that's what
Sure.
fantasy does cuz let's be honest, let's get something out of the way right now. Like Star Wars is not wholly it's not just science fiction. It's actually
No,
more
it's not
deeply
science fiction at
rooted,
all,
right?
actually.
It's
It's
deeply
space
more deeply
fantasy.
rooted in
Yeah.
fantasy and
Yeah,
mythology. So,
100%.
oh
Yeah,
yeah, so I'm glad we're on the same page about that. But that's absolutely
absolutely.
what that is. Yeah.
Well, and that's probably, and I've never, I don't know if I've like specifically like and intentionally thought about it this way before, but that probably is like one of the main roots of the divide between Trek and
Mm-hmm.
Wars,
Mm-hmm.
that like that
Yep.
Star Trek is much more science fiction
Yeah.
and Star Wars is much more fantasy. And I've always been a guy like I love Star Trek a lot too. Like Star Trek
Mm-hmm.
was definitely very formative for me.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it's weird, like in a weird way. Like I never really I never really picked up on the progressiveness of
Mm-hmm.
Star Trek
Yeah.
until I was a good bit older. I was
Yeah.
just here. I was here for like the space, like adventure, techno babble, like
Mm-hmm.
in my spare time as a middle schooler, like what I would literally do for fun was like read the Star Trek like reference books
Yes.
that just had like the Star Trek chronology or the Star Trek
Right.
encyclopedia that like listed in, in detail like what happened in this episode, what happened in
Mm-hmm.
that episode. And like it was just at that perfect age where like everything that you read just kind of goes like
Yeah.
and like just sponges like into the deepest recesses of your brain and never leaves.
Yep.
And so to this day, I can like give me any 30 seconds of any Star Trek and I
Yeah.
will tell you like the name of the episode, like season, what happens and yeah,
That's amazing. All right,
yeah,
so wait, I
it's
have
it's
questions for
totally
you then.
useless.
Because as my dad, I'm not a Trekkie, but my dad was. So
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm familiar. It's adjacent to my world. So, but so my first question that just popped in my mind is: are you fluent in Klingon?
No, no, but I did try.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I got the
you have
Klingon
to.
dictionary and I did attempt, and I can do. I've got your kapla
Yeah.
and what's the other one? I forget. There was
Mm,
something else that I did know at some point. Um, but I'm also very much a language
yeah.
guy, and so I love the fictional languages. I'm a super Tolkien guy too,
Yes.
and
Nice.
so like all of that deep world building
Yeah.
and fictional languages definitely is my jam.
That's
But
awesome.
uh, but yeah,
Yeah, I see. There's different things for different people. There's
sure,
definitely some things that are accessible on more of the techies or science nerds brain when you're watching something like
right,
Star Trek, or there's on like you said Tolkien and like the Lord of the Rings, with everything as far as the lore and the story, the world building, and there's
yeah,
there's a little bit of both of that in Star Wars, which I think is great, and it's obviously way more mythology based and
hmm
fantasy for sure, but there are elements of some science fiction that sneaks its way in there where you can still fall in love with the tech side of things, which is what I love.
sure.
Like the
You know,
blending of those two worlds, the technology
yeah,
world and the ancient world, because it was a long time ago in a galaxy far,
right,
far
right,
away.
right.
The new and the
Yeah,
old combining is just so unique and creative. There we go again,
I
talking about
think
combining two things that weren't
yeah,
together
I think you're
before.
gonna have a hard time selling me on the case
Yeah.
that Star Trek has better ships than Star
Mm.
Wars. Like the
Oh, yes.
Star Wars ships are
Yes.
so
Oh, and I love
iconic.
ships so much.
Like
Ships are one of
Like,
my favorite things.
and there's like, and there's some really cool ships in
Yeah.
Star Trek. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
Enterprise D is
Mm.
probably like the Enterprise D I will put up against any ship in Star Wars also.
Really? Wow.
Like
That's
it's the
a
Enterprise D
bold
is
claim.
a beautiful ship.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's another ship in Star Wars that is as beautiful as the D. Maybe the Queen's ship, the
Oh,
Naboo
yes.
cruiser
Yes.
is
Yeah.
also an exceptionally beautiful ship. But but the Star Wars but in Star Trek you've always got like the nacelles are there in some form or another.
Mm-hmm.
Um there's a saucer, there's nacelles. You break away from that occasionally with things like the Defiant
Yeah.
and other races will have different kind of shipbuilding conventions that can be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that Star Wars, the design of ships in Star Wars are always so striking
Yeah.
and iconic.
Mm-hmm.
Like every freaking buddy knows the Millennium Falcon.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody knows an X-wing.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows a Star Destroyer. Everyone knows a Death Star. You
Yeah.
know, um, I don't think there's not much that has penetrated the zeitgeist
Yeah.
like those iconic Star Wars ships. I mean, maybe a Borg cube,
Mm.
but probably not as much as an X-wing. I think more
Yeah.
people would know an X-wing
I
than would
would,
know a
yeah.
Borg cube.
I would venture, yeah, that's probably a good
You'd
assumption.
probably be on approximately equal footing with an Enterprise.
Yes. Yeah. I think the Enterprise is
But
probably your most recognizable.
but other than the Enterprise, you've got very little
Yeah.
that is widely known and nothing that's as it kind of I don't know, awe-inspiring is maybe going a little far.
Yeah.
um I mean, certainly in that opening shot of A New Hope, like the sheer scale of the Star Destroyer is really something else.
Yes. Yes.
um but uh but yeah, I think that also kind of just goes back to the kind of stories that Star Wars has. It is this mythological
Mm-hmm.
kind of there's a more primal kind of heart level connection
Yeah.
that you have with the Star Wars stories that I think you get with most of Star Trek. Because again, it just kind of is the kind of the philosophical differences. Like Star Trek is much more cerebral,
Yeah.
and Star Wars is much more kind of heart
Oh, yeah.
level a lot of the times.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and
yeah,
I think there was definitely just like keeping in line with what you're talking about, but also bringing in the ships aspect of it. Like there, Star Wars could have gone a way different direction, and it could have gone more science fictiony if you look at like the Ralph McQuarrie drawings, and you look at how
okay, sure.
clean things were and how futuristic
Mm,
they were. Like that could have, if they would have stuck true, or you stayed true to Macquarie's original vision, at least
hmm.
maybe not, they mythology aside, aesthetically, if they just would have stayed with the concept art, it
Yeah,
could have lent itself way more. And that's not, I'm not saying the aesthetic is what drives whether it's sci-fi or not. It's
right.
absolutely the content, but you do have some visual cues from Macquarie's art that would lead you to believe that it was meant to be sci-fi. I don't know that he
Hmm.
and Lucas were on the same page, because look how different the end result became. I mean, the
Sure.
the the concept art was beautiful, but if you listen to
Yeah.
like interviews with Doug Chang, who's right now at the same place that Macquarie was with the concept art
Yeah.
and design, they had a very different philosophy back in the mid 70s when they were designing everything, and it kind
Right.
of morphed and changed into what Star Wars became where the main driver of the aesthetic, especially for vehicles, was the silhouette, and that was the main design element that they were looking at. George said to Ralph McQuarrie, and it seems like it was almost a course correct. If you listen to these interviews,
Yeah.
it almost seems like there was a disagreement, and Lucas said to McQuarrie, no, like I'm not worried about the details. I want when somebody sees the silhouette of an X-wing that they know that that's an
Yeah.
X-wing. So let's
Yeah.
forget the details,
I
the
mean,
shininess, and let's
that
go with the
that
silhouette.
that totally tracks with
Hmm.
the conversation that we were just happening about the way that the Star Wars ships were so striking.
Yeah, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
psychology to it, and each one of them, like even the prequels, like we talked about my disappointment in the prequels, like one of my
Sure.
biggest disappointments, not just getting to see what happened to Luke. My favorite ship growing up was the X-wing, the
Right.
T-65 Incom
Yeah.
X-wing, and I wanted to see more of that ship, and I was disappointed
Yeah.
because this was before that time. So I don't even know if Incom as a corporation existed during the Age of the Republic. I don't believe it did.
Interesting.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I'm not
I might get flamed for that if I get that wrong. But at that time, I did not like the Naboo Starfighter. Now it's one of my favorite.
really.
I didn't, not at first.
Wow.
Now it's
Interesting.
one of my favorite ships, and I actually have like the original Lego UCS. That was one of the very first things I grabbed from my mom's house, is because I saw a used one
Yeah.
out of the box, no instructions, for like $500-$600 in the used market, and I was like, wait, I have that model at home. So with the chrome Lego pieces and everything,
Nice.
the chrome kind of paint on them, but the image of that ship. I mean, right now you look at the silhouette of the Naboo Starfighter, the N1,
Yeah.
like it looks like a Psy, like the weapon Psy,
Oh,
and
interesting.
you just look at it now, and it's just
Sure.
such a beautiful, beautiful thing. If you look at Doug Chang's original concept art for that ship, it was ugly as all get out. But
Really? Oh, that's
yeah,
interesting. I'll
but
have to
what
look
it
that up.
became, it's just simple. Like that's the thing. Doug did the same thing that Ralph McQuarrie did. Is he overcomplicated the design, and Lucas had to
Uh-huh.
come in, course correct, and say, no. It's about the silhouette. Bring it to something a little bit more
Interesting.
simple. So you look, if you see the original concept art for the N1 and to what it became, there's a very striking difference, and it's in that it's not so much detail, because there's detail in Star Wars ships as a whole. There is minute detail, but we're talking in the overall design. There was too much detail in the silhouette, and once you simplified the silhouette, that's when those ships became way more striking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Interesting.
that.
Okay, I'm gonna have to.
Sorry, I could talk about this for days. I love ships
No,
so
no, no,
much.
no. It's great. I love it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look that up later. Um. Okay. All right. Give us the short story of the worship leader TM situation,
Oh
because
man,
I was kind of following along with that, and it's kind of a wild ride.
it is very much a wild ride. It's tough because hang on a sec. The whole circumstance, really throughout this whole experience of building this page and this brand of Rogue Worship Leader, I was really cautious along the way and kind of worried that at some point, and I didn't think I was going to get very big. I thought I hit 2,000 followers and I was like, oh, this is great. Like I celebrated 2,000. I might have even done a giveaway for 2K. And
Yeah.
then I was like, oh, I'm probably going to plateau after this. This isn't going to go much farther. And I forget how many followers I had by the time this whole rolled around. I think maybe 60 or 70,000 followers. So like at that time, right before the Worship Leader magazine stuff happened, I was
Yeah.
actually worried that Disney was going to find out about me and send
Oh,
a cease
wow.
and desist letter because I was using their IP. Fortunately, I did so.
Uh-huh.
So I will preface this before we go into the Worship Leader stuff. I actually did work for the government in my
Oh.
day job. I'm a bivocational worship leader, so I always had a full time job, 40 hours a week, Monday through Friday, and then I was always a volunteer worship leader up until about 2014, when I
Yeah.
got my first part time gig at a church, and I was working two jobs, full time day job and doing probably 15 to 20 hours a week worship leading.
Mm.
So in my day job, I can't really say where I worked in the government, but I'm very fluent with U.S. law and all that kind of stuff. So I was very
Wow.
familiar. Yes, I was very familiar with how to read the U.S. code and
Okay.
went into the trademark law, USPTO website, and so I knew all about that stuff before the worship leader debacle,
Yeah.
and I was more I knew trademark law and I knew that I was safe because there is a clause, there's a
Fair
section of the
use.
copyright law called fair use.
Right.
Absolutely. So I
Yeah.
think most memers would be protected under fair use because it's a parody of the IP that you're using,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So I wasn't really worried about that, but I did in the back of my mind have that, legitimate fear that maybe the House of Mouse could, lay the banhammer down on me. So
Yeah. If
but
anybody could or would, it would be them.
it would be them, right? So, I mean, hopefully it would be done quietly and I would just go about my business and do something else, but it was shocking to me. So all that to say, honestly, when I first found out about the worship leader trademark, I was completely shocked. And the fact that they were actually defending the trademark was shocking to me as well. Although I do have to say, like, I don't begrudge them for defending it because there is an aspect of having a trademark where if somebody is legitimately impersonating you or your business, you do have to
Right.
defend it, right? So you have to
Yeah,
send a
sure.
cease and desist letter, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Hmm.
So what had happened was I forget when, honestly. I'm a little bit shaky on the timeline officially, but I had received a DM from Worship Leader Magazine asking if like who runs the page. I think it was something just simple like that. I have a website, rogueworshipleader.com. I have an email address, which is, admin@rogueworshipleader.com. And so I directed them there and I said, email me here. And I thought it was for some official business inquiry. Like any business inquiry, I normally do that on, through email and not through Instagram DMs. So with some exceptions to that. But so I was waiting for an email from them, seeing what they wanted from me. Nothing. Fast forward, I believe 6 months later, randomly out of the blue. So I have Instagram, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Facebook, I'm on YouTube, Twitter. I think that's all my platforms. But anyway, I noticed, and my Facebook's not particularly huge. I really just have all my Instagram stuff is being automatically posted to Facebook, and
Right.
I'm not on Facebook as much personally. So occasionally I would go in there and check DMs, reply to comments, things like that. But I'm not super active on Facebook. But the one day I went into Facebook and I noticed that my page had been reported and taken down. And I think I had maybe 6,000 or 7,000 followers at that point. Not a huge following, but still, it was a community of like-minded people who were, they were just congregating on Facebook instead of Instagram, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But that's a subset of my following that is now gone. There's a lot of people who are on Facebook that are not on Instagram.
Yeah.
And so I was like, who did this? Like, how did this happen? I thought maybe it could have been Disney. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
So I actually, there's a lot to this, but I actually was able to find out through like an appeal process and through some other things that the company that reported me was called Authentic Media LLC, and so that's a business that's owned by or not owned by. I think it's there was a name attached to the account, and I won't go in. Let's just leave names out of it, I guess. But so I did some digging and some research and found out that Authentic Media either owned or was the parent company of Worship Leader Magazine. So I kind of put the two and two together, and so I was like, oh, maybe that's what they were trying to DM me about or email me about. I wasn't sure, but what was interesting is I didn't the page didn't get reported. Individual pieces of content got reported, and so there was
Huh.
like 8 or 9 memes that were reported for copyright infringement. And I
Huh.
was like, what in the world? So, being the sleuth that I am and working in the government, I went to the USPTO and I was like, well, if it's copyright or a trademark infringement, oh, that's what it was, trademark infringement. So I searched for the trademark and I thought, I wonder if it's Worship Leader Magazine, Authentic Media. Looked up both of those, saw that it was Worship Leader. So Worship Leader Magazine, that's what it was called when it was a print publication. At some point, and I used to know this, but at some point in their life cycle, as they probably 2016 or so, 2015, they transitioned from being a print publication only to being more online. They were trying to keep up
Right.
with the digital age, and so they dropped
Yeah.
the magazine from their name, I believe. And they, but the whole time, excuse me, their business name, their business name was Worship Leader, and then because they had a magazine, it was Worship Leader R for registered trademark magazine, right? So many people don't know this, but they would think that Worship Leader Magazine is the trademark, but it's actually Worship Leader. So I think
Yeah.
at some point back in the early '90s, Chuck Fromm, the late founder of Worship Leader Magazine, actually trademarked the term Worship Leader. And
That's
so
so
it's
bizarre.
wild. Yeah.
Like,
They
I don't understand how you get granted a trademark
right.
on a term like worship leader.
Yeah. Well, at that point, it wasn't as common. I mean, I think it was 93 or 92. It wasn't as
Yeah.
common as a phrase. And if you, I don't know that it
Okay,
exists
maybe.
anymore, but if you, back in those days, during the whole trademark debacle, on the Worship Leader Magazine website and the Authentic Media website, I believe, they actually had a whole section about Chuck Fromm and him coining the term worship leader. They claimed to have coined the term worship leader. So that's why they registered it. They were granted the registration. And at some point, in the late 2017, I forget what year exactly, they had been
Yeah.
using the trademark for so long that they registered for, I believe it's called a Section 15, which grants them, like, no one can dispute their right to the claim of because they've been
Wow.
using it for that long.
That's
So
crazy.
yes, so it feels like, and I don't know this for a fact, but it feels like as soon as they got the Section 15, and I could be wrong on that. I'm a little bit fuzzy on the details. It's Section something. I believe it's Section
Yeah.
15. But
Okay.
Section 15 of the USPTO or the trademark code says that no one can contest your trademark if you've used it for a certain amount of time
Unreal.
in the marketplace. So because of that, it seems like after they did that, they started going after people with the term worship leader in their name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a part of that.
Wild.
Worship Leader Probs was a part of that. They had also had some run-ins with them, and that was well documented on the Worship Leader Probs page as well. So I won't speak to that because that wasn't my
Yeah.
situation. But and then another company, there was a couple other companies, and I'll leave their names out of this too, that had Worship Leader in their title that did actually get legitimate cease and desists back in like the late 2010s.
Wow.
I had never been given an official cease and desist.
Yeah.
And other people have been contacted by lawyers or had something official that kept them from talking about it, right?
That's wild.
So I felt compelled, and then because this had happened to my Facebook, because they had taken my Facebook down first before contacting me,
Yeah.
I was like, if they contact me with a lawyer and there's any kind of confidentiality clauses attached to that email that would prevent me from talking about this, dude, I prayed about it. I brought it to
Yeah.
the Lord and I said, should I speak up and be a voice for those who do not have a voice? Is that what you
Yeah.
want me to do, Lord?
Yeah.
And I felt a very clear, strong conviction to, before I got contacted by anybody who could silence me, I wanted to
Yeah.
get this out into the open because these things shouldn't be happening in the darkness. These things between
Sure.
Christian companies, this should be done in the light because I felt like what was happening was shady,
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the long and the short of it.
And so the upshot of it, then the conclusion is that basically they said, "Oh, it's okay."
Yeah, I think the backlash was they severely suffered a probably one of the worst PR nightmares that a company could suffer, because the court of public opinion was definitely against them.
Yeah.
So they definitely backpedaled. I know their relationship with worship leader Probs was rocky, and there
Hmm.
wasn't an agreeable walking away from that. And so
Mm.
Brian had just chose to change the name to Worship Probs. It would just be the easiest thing for him.
Yeah.
Which and in his defense, honestly, like I think that was the right decision, because unlike me, this is Brian's livelihood.
Yeah.
It's his job now, which is great.
Wow.
I'm very thankful that he has that opportunity, and I'm proud of what he's built Worship Leader Probs or Worship Probs into.
Yeah.
But for me, this is my side, thing. I don't really make a whole lot of money from this, honestly, other than what like
Yeah.
Instagram gives you for like bonuses. And I have brand
Sure.
partnerships, but none of them have any kind of retainer or money attached. Like
Yeah.
I would rather turn around and give like discounts to my followers or give away things. So all my partnerships
Sure.
have been for the purposes of like promoting other people's companies, companies that I believe in, brands that I use, that I want my
Yeah.
followers to
Sure.
use because they've been so amazing. So those are the
Yeah.
brand partnerships that I've built. So this is not a lucrative venture for me. And if I lost it, as devastating as that would be, it's not going to hurt me financially. So I'm like, you know
Right.
what? I'm not changing my name. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, because and I'm not super attached to the name either. I actually like for a while didn't like the name because again, I just made this account to blow off steam. I didn't think it was
Right.
going to become this huge thing, but the name came about because like I needed a name, and with my background in branding, building brands, and producing shows and things like that for podcasts and whatnot. That's my world. So I created a brand around this because I was originally going to keep myself anonymous. So I didn't want my
Ah.
face or a personal brand kind of out in the front. So I kept it faceless, made a brand out of it. And I was like, I need a name. So I was like, you know what? I'm a child of the 90s, and I used to
Yeah.
play, maybe this was in the 2000s, I can't remember. But there was a video game. It was a sequel to, it was probably, I think, the third sequel to the Rogue Squadron series.
Yeah.
And it was called Rogue Leader, right?
Yeah.
It might have been the second or third sequel. I can't remember exactly which, but
So I forget which.
yeah.
I know I had one of those. I
Yeah.
forget exactly which one it was.
Oh, it was
It was
GameCube.
whichever
It was
one.
on GameCube. So it had to have been the
There was a
2000s.
version on PC as well,
Yes.
and it
Yes.
had a patch that you could download to play with the Naboo Starfighter,
Yes. Yes.
which was like far like the Naboo Starfighter was like absolutely superior to
Oh
every
yeah.
other ship in
It
that
was
game, like
not
by
even
a
fair. It was
long
way
shot.
OP. Yeah.
It was so amazing.
Yes, I remember that. I love that. That
I bought a joystick like for the purpose of being able
yes.
to use it for that game.
Love that. All right. Well,
Yeah.
so we both have some great fond memories about the N1. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, that's good.
It's such a great ship. But yeah, so that was what the name came from. Rogue Leader. I just slapped the word worship in between, and
Yeah.
then it kind of developed a second connotation because I was actually pumping out some spicy worship memes, making fun of a lot of the things that we as worship leaders do or
Right.
are into, and
Yeah.
making fun of all, the Bethels and the Hillsongs.
Yes.
And I was super spicy about it. So I was like, and plus I have some pretty against the grain takes when it comes to worship. So I was like, this is perfect. I'm a rogue worship leader. I'm kind of going against the grain of what worship leaders do. And plus we got to stop taking ourselves so seriously. Like I just wanted
Oh my
to
lord.
provide a place for people to laugh and to
Yes.
commiserate together and to just talk about the ridiculous things that we do and just laugh at ourselves. So
Yeah.
that's where the name came from.
Man, that's such a thing that's a struggle that I had in another church
Yeah.
where like you get to taking yourself so seriously
Mm-hmm.
and everything is just freighted with so much importance,
Yeah.
and it really leads to this kind of like dreadful like spiritual pride.
Mm.
And in the context that I'm so glad I'm not in anymore, it also had this other like horrible um effect of the whole team like being very satisfied with mediocrity,
Yeah. Yeah.
because there are like because the guy who was in charge had no imagination for the difference between a performance and a
Mm.
show.
Mm.
And they're like, if we focus on being too good,
Right.
it's gonna be a pride problem.
Mm-hmm.
And they just didn't understand that like it's already a pride problem, just not in the way that you think.
Yeah.
And yeah, boy, I had some real struggles
Mm.
over there. But now I'm in a church where they take it, they take it seriously. They take it as seriously as it needs to be taken
Yes.
in
Yeah.
order to like to offer to God something that is as excellent as we can make it,
Yes.
because that's what he's worthy of,
Yeah,
and that's the
absolutely,
whole
man.
that's the whole thing. Like it's not about me needing to be uh, aggrandized on the stage.
Mm-hmm.
It's about it's about offering something excellent to God, and
Yeah.
also creating an environment for the rest of the people in the congregation to have a and this is a whole other thing too, like the whole idea of like a worship experience
Yeah.
is also a sticky and
Mm-hmm.
and and kind of a fraught idea,
Yeah.
because I've experienced really really strongly in the last few years that like you can achieve the very very same kind of like emotional state
Mm-hmm.
with excellent, well, not even excellent, but with the kind of music that will bring that on, that has
Yeah.
nothing to do with God.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
it's so easy to like use music to manipulate people's
Mm-hmm.
emotions,
Yeah.
and and you can't. It's almost like just an algorithm, like
Right.
you plug in this chord progression
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
with
Yeah.
these dynamics and this
Right.
kind of
Oh,
instrumentation,
yeah.
and you will elicit in
Yes.
people this given emotional state.
Mm-hmm.
And I when I finally like kind of clued into that, it made me like I almost have like this visceral like disgust
Mm.
when I can feel myself
Right.
being emotionally manipulated in
Yeah.
that way, be it with worship music or whatever,
Right.
the secular music. Like I
Yeah.
don't like it in either situation. um but yeah, like, and it's that kind of thing that people will say, like, the reason that people go to church is just for this aesthetic
Mm.
experience, like they because of how it makes you feel.
Right.
and and that was a whole trend in worship music, that's very true, like with all
Mm-hmm.
the with the Jesus is my girlfriend
Yeah.
style,
Yeah.
songs of the aughts.
Yeah.
And yeah, like there's a million years worth of conversations to have
Oh, absolutely.
around all of this stuff. um
But I'm 100% with you. Like that's honestly like the Lord created music, and if you think about it, He created it to be like a language, and so just
yeah.
in the same way that you say certain words, and
Hmm.
depending on who they're coming from, and depending on what those words are, they can bring a tear to your eye, or they could
Yep.
make you happy or sad. And so we don't look at language as being emotionally manipulative, right? Manipulative. Um, we
Yeah,
don't look
not
at language
intrinsically, yeah.
not intrinsically, but it can be, right? And I think music
Hmm.
is just another language that is inherently emotionally manipulative. And so if you look at it
Hmm.
that way, it's, you play a minor chord and it feels sad. You play a major chord
Obviously,
and
yeah.
it feels happy. And that's
Right.
just the nature of music. So you can either look at it one of two ways, that music, regardless of whether it's worship or secular, is inherently manipulative, or that's just the way music works. You
Or
know?
evocative. It doesn't have to be
Yeah,
manipulative.
evocative.
Like
Yes, exactly.
evocative, I think is a
Right.
less
Less like
um
a hairy word to say. Yeah.
pejorative, yeah,
Yeah.
term. Hmm.
And that's just it. So a lot of people confuse evocative for manipulative. And so if you're
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
at the end of the day, worship, I mean music as worship is still just a tool. And you can
Right.
absolutely misuse a tool and make it
Yeah.
manipulative on purpose without any thought of honoring the Lord in this. And maybe you're
Yes.
just trying to boost your own ego. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of that in the worship world. And so
100%.
the intention. So I wouldn't blame the music. I would,
Right.
for being manipulative. It's because you wouldn't blame the tool for doing the wrong thing, for being misused. A tool has to be misused by someone. So I
Right.
would look at it
Guns
that
don't
way.
kill people, people kill
Yeah,
people.
exactly. Yeah. Now, I wasn't going to say that, but I totally agree. So, worship music doesn't manipulate people. Worship leaders who manipulate people through worship music manipulate people.
Very elegantly said. That just rolls right off the
Right off the
tongue.
tongue. Not confusing at all. It's about as clear as mud.
No, no, but I think you're 100% right. That is yeah. Yeah, I
No,
think
I
that's
agree with
right.
you. Yeah. Good stuff,
Oh,
man.
that's fun. Okay. Well, listen, Scott, I know we could like continue to talk for a million years about all of
Oh,
this
yeah.
stuff,
This is
and
great.
I would probably love, like, we didn't even get to talk about like current Star Wars
I know. Shoot.
content.
Yeah.
And so probably maybe after Acolyte is out, we can
Yeah. Let's dive
come back
in.
and talk about that. My friend Aaron Welty is also like a major Star Wars guy. He's a frequent co-host
Mm-hmm.
on the show, and so maybe we need to have a little bit of a roundtable
I think that's a
on
great
on
idea.
that.
Yep.
But I have been in this rut. It's no longer a mistake. It's now a pattern because I keep doing it for from in like the last half dozen episodes. Um, we like to end the show with a segment that I call guaranteed good news.
Ah.
And I have been just sort of like plucking the best story that I like off of my like goodnewsnetwork.org
Oh, cool.
website.
Yeah.
But what I've been trying to do is kind of bring it a little closer to home,
Mm-hmm.
and ask my guests if there's anything kind of cool and uplifting, encouraging, that's going on in your church or your community that you would be able to share with the audience to give some good news. So if you happen to have something off
Yeah.
the top of your head, then that's great. Otherwise, I did pull up a story here, but
No, I mean, honestly, and this isn't a super long story, but like, I know there's a lot of other churches that are uh, having to deal with the same hardship that my church is having to deal with right now. And that is honestly like we're at two services right now and we're bursting at the seams. So
yeah,
there has been talks of adding a third service, and that's just really difficult. We used to have one pre-COVID, and it just burned people out. So we're really trying to avoid that like the plague. But we don't want to grow too vertically this way where we just become like a huge mega church and lose our soul, right?
right.
So we're talking new buildings, we're talking church planting, all those things. So it's really exciting to be on the precipice of like growth and then what the next steps are. So we're having lots and lots of conversations about the future. And just in the last year, we found out that our small little rural area, there were a couple farms that were sold because it's a backwoods country church, but there are a couple of farms were sold, and they're adding like 500 brand new homes in the area because we're
Wow,
really close
cool.
to like a turnpike, like a really
Yeah,
main artery that it made a lot of sense to put a lot of homes in that area, and so
Okay.
the mission field is growing, and it's really exciting to be on the front end of that and praying and seeking God for how to go about the harvest. So that's been
Yeah.
really, really fun for us.
Well, let the church roll on. That's great
Yeah,
news.
man.
Love it.
Hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, we will put all of your links in the show notes. Like I said, I share your
Awesome.
stuff all the time because
Thanks,
it's
man.
it's great.
Appreciate
Um,
it.
I I asked you the other day, and I looked way back
Yeah.
all through your stuff, and I could not find it. Are you sure that you have done the what one? Which one was it?
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
What was it? Oh yeah, the Moore. Kylo Ren's
Yes.
Moore from his Mercy is More with the
Yes.
Gettys.
And I can't take credit for that. That was a collab between me and Honest Youth Pastor. So
Oh,
he
okay.
had the idea. He actually posted it, and with all my like I have the tracks to that song, and
Uh-huh.
I
Uh-huh.
have Ableton, and I can edit it a little bit better. So I was like, could we do
Yeah.
that together? I'll edit it. We'll put it together. But it was his idea. So yeah, I did. I'll have to see if I can find that for you and send it your way.
Okay, yeah. I couldn't find it
I
because
love that
that's
song.
it,
Oh
it
my
occurred
gosh.
to me the other day and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this needs to be a thing. If you haven't done it already, I'd love to
Yeah.
see it. So
I'll have to repost
uh
it because we
okay.
actually did that song just like a couple weeks ago. I mean, such a powerful, powerful
It's a
anthem.
great song.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely, love it.
Yep. Okay, sweet.
I'll send that your way then.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks again, Scott, for your time this evening. And this has been
No
a treat.
problem.
And I am super looking forward to talking with you again some other time.
Let's do it, man. Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks so much, man, and may the force be with you.
All right. Well, you can reach us on all of our social media stuff. It's always at 2geeksoup. The email is 2geeksoup@gmail.com. And even though it probably makes me the aging hippie art teacher, this podcast is a proud member of the More Than One Lesson faculty.